Thanks for coming on.
Thank you. So, hello everybody. It's my pleasure to be here and talk to you about more or less what me and some colleagues, what we did the past years and what we are working on. So as Enno already introduced, this is a talk about having a secure development lifecycle in a quite large company. Maybe some thoughts on myself in the beginning. So my name is Arne Lüttke. I'm in IT since 2004. Since 2007, I'm doing web development and everything around that. And since 2011, additionally in InfoSec. Yeah, I'm working at Bosch, central IT department. I'm giving you some numbers later, as I had a chance to talk with some other speakers and attendees here, and I think it's quite unknown how big this company actually is, so I'll give you some introduction. And I'm in the business unit, which is more or less responsible for all web topics, IoT, mobile stuff, so everything that's somehow related to the internet is more or less done by my business unit. Yeah, my hobbies are, I have 2 children, which is quite challenging. If I have time, I'm doing coding, and I like learning Chinese. So for somebody in the audience, challenge me afterwards. So, hey, ni hao. Okay, in case you have questions, you can contact me in my email, and yeah, I'm replying to you. Okay. So just to give a quick introduction, so this is the OC stack, who hopefully everybody of you knows, and we heard a lot of talks on how you can secure firewalls or break them, which is then more or less on, let's say, layer 2 to 3, yeah, and yeah, more or less this is me. So my daily work is layer 7. I'm software architect, and this is what this talk is also about, what we can do on layer 7. In terms of security. Now I have some dual purpose slides, I would call them. Yeah, one is some little bit introduction of the company I'm working for, and also it gives you an introduction in how big this company actually is. Yeah, and as you might have read in the newspapers, Bosch tries to hire something like 5-digit number of engineers. So yeah, maybe feel encouraged to apply. Okay, so Bosch is more or less a worldwide company. We have something like, just taking a look at the research department, we have 55,000 researchers worldwide, and at 118 locations, and they're all more or less in a single network. Overall, Bosch files 22 patents each day. Yeah, so I think 2 years ago we had more than 3,000 patents, so it's quite a huge number. And this is actually what makes this company one of the leading companies when it comes to patent applications. Some overall numbers, right now Bosch has something around 375,000 associates worldwide. And yeah, more to come. Yeah. We have 4 business sectors, which I will explain a little bit later. 440 subsidiaries, and yeah, we're more or less present in a lot of countries in this world, something like 60 countries. When we include sales locations, then it's something like 150. Coming to the 4 business sectors, so the biggest business sector which Bosch is working in, which is something making like the 50% of our annual $60 billion revenue, something, is the mobility sector. So this is, Bosch is the world's biggest car parts manufacturer, so you can more or less pick whatever car is in the world. If you remove the Bosch parts in that car, it will not gonna drive, yeah. So pick whatever car you want, yeah. We also in industrial technology, for example, is there somebody from London here? Yeah? No, but you know that famous bridge in London, what is it called? I forgot it. The tower bridge, thank you. The tower bridge is lifted by hydraulics from Bosch, for example. We are in energy and building technology, so home appliances, for example. I got asked by another speaker this morning, Bosch, that's the company that makes washing machines, yeah? Actually, he's right, we do this, but this is only one of a lot of things we're doing, yeah? And then we have also consumer goods, which is, all kind of power tools, drills, grinders, whatever stuff. Lawn mowers, so these kind of things. So we're quite a big company, we're quite a versatile company, and that's actually what also makes it pretty interesting and challenging. Yeah. So, how to implement an SDL in a large international company? I try to rephrase it for the Germans here. Yeah. It's kind of, die Kunst, dicke Bretter zu bohren. Yeah, this is more or less a different translation would be it's quite a hard task to do. Yeah, and you need quite some endurance. And when you take a look at the timeline, which I have later, you will see why. So first, quick introduction on the why and the how. So why is it important to have a secure development lifecycle? Maybe this is kind of something you have heard 4 to 7 times, whatever. But I just want to also give some real life experience here, why it is so important. And then how we got this started, yeah? So when we more or less wanted to do this, we were like the guys standing in front of a huge mountain and thinking, okay, how can we do this? And this is more or less our approach, how we got this started. Then I want to talk to you what is currently existing, what is the present, so what did we achieve, what are we going to do within the near future, the lessons we learned, which hopefully is valuable for you guys if you want to do this in your companies as well, and then kind of a summary on what my impression is on this. Yeah, okay, the why I think is pretty obvious. That I got some nice slides from Enno when we've been talking about this 5 years ago. That more or less 92% of exploits, vulnerabilities are in the software stack. Maybe that's why there is the complexity actually existing. Yeah, this is where most of the new application code is written. Yeah, I think more or less taking a look at TCP/IP stack and something like this is pretty standard since years. Lots of people look on that. Okay, taking a look at Heartbleed, that doesn't actually mean it's secure, but the chance that there are some really exploitable bugs in there is pretty low, yeah, compared to some new software that an Indian colleague wrote just 2 weeks ago. So I think this is pretty obvious that most of the bugs are existing in the application layer. So it's not a choice actually to think about security in the application layer. And this is a graphic that I copied from a colleague of mine. I thought actually he's here today, but he decided to change the department. So he's not here, and the statement security is shared responsibility is what I more or less phrasing throughout the whole company and everybody I get in touch to, because when we take a look at the usual software stack, does this have a laser pointer? I don't know, maybe. Yeah, it has. So when we take a look at the usual software stack, you have something like network and hardware at the bottom, then you have something like an OS, you have maybe kind of a platform running, and then your application, which you're actually developing. So if we take a look at the usual web setup, that could be, network is whatever you have, and an operation system could be Linux, your platform would be an Apache, and the application could be some PHP or whatever code you're writing actually. Yeah, and the thing is here that threat mitigation is not only on the horizontal level, meaning you need to splice your path of access into several zones. Yeah, it's also you have to do the threat mitigation over the whole software application stack, and I think this is something that a lot of people tend to forget. Yeah. And that's why I like this kind of slide, because it's so important. I'll come to a better example later why this is so important. Yeah, the why, more or less what I figured out or what I encountered and as a software architect is I saw lots of applications that are designed to be unsecure, yeah, from an architecture perspective, because this basics that I just presented were more or less totally ignored, yeah. For example, I have a two-layer network architecture, like I have these two zones. They're completely separate from a network point of view. But the component in the first layer is just a reverse proxy. That's more or less forwarding whatever you pass on to whatever is behind. So more or less the nice idea of having two separate networks on an application level is completely more or less useless. Yeah, say it that way. Yeah, and then this is something that I hear very often is, yeah, let's first see whether this is working. Yeah, we can implement security later. Yeah. Yeah, and this is what I say. This is say, guys, security is nothing you can implement later. It's nothing like a jacket you can put on when it's raining outside and then you're good, yeah? If you do not think of security from the beginning of your project, later there is nothing you can do, yeah? Because a lot of the security things really start with the core architecture of your application, yeah? And this is nothing you can change at the end of the project, yeah? And this is why this is so important. And nowadays, where the projects get more and more agile, where actually this is becoming a usual style of doing implementation, yeah. Just you have your user stories, you do some sprints, yeah, then you talk to the customer who's the product owner and he says what he actually wants, and you can figure out that in the beginning security is not really important to the customer because he wants to do something, yeah. And then maybe at the end of the project you did some sprints, you have something existing, and then you figure out you have a huge security problems. And this is really amazing, and that's why I think it's really important to address these things as soon as possible. And this is what I told here. Then applications are designed wrong or developed wrong using, yeah, simply they're impossible to be made secure using some magic, because then I hear, we just put a WAF in front of it. Yeah, we have a great application and it's working. We just make it secure putting a WAF in front of it. And that's where I say, okay, imagine you have a web application, yeah, and an image is not displayed on that web application. You would consider that a bug, yeah? So what would you do? Would you go find the developer who did that application and tell him, hey, the picture is not displayed, or would you put an appliance in front of it to insert the image into the HTTP stream, yeah? So it sounds funny, isn't it? But this is actually what we're trying to do with a WAF, because security bugs are bugs like anything else, and I'm not saying that WAFs are completely useless. I'm just saying that it's for me it's a workaround. I say a WAF is simply a workaround because the best way to fix security bugs is at the root. Yeah, and coming to my former company, there we had kind of also a WAF, and then the application didn't work, and then we were tweaking the rules, yeah. And at the end, I don't know whether it had any security impact, yeah. It's similar to SAP security. You want to connect to your SAP system, it doesn't work, and at the end, the user you connect with is sub-all, because then everybody's happy it works, yeah. Yeah, let's take maybe a real-life example. Okay, so you have an ERP system or whatever backend system here in your enterprise, buried behind a lot of security layers, yeah. And for whatever business case, you need to expose some functionality to the internet, yeah. I'm not judging, these cases are existing. Let's just take a simple online shop. You want to sell stuff, and that selling in the web is mandatory for all the companies this time is a no-brainer. So I'm not judging the business cases, it's mandatory. Okay, so what does the good architect do? He says, yeah, okay, we do it via web services. Web services is great. So he gets some developer who is doing a web service here, yeah. And then he knows, oh, I have to go through all of these security layers, and I will definitely not get a firewall approval for me to access from here directly to here. So what he actually does is something like this, yeah. So that means, okay, he's maybe having some reverse proxies sitting here, and more or less, yeah, technically that's working, yeah. So let's take a look at this, how that looks from the technology stack. So on the network level, still everything's great. Yeah, these networks are purely separated. Yeah, and perfect, yeah, we are fine. So we assume that also this is independent servers somehow running, and they also have kind of independent operation systems, so we can say on that level it's the same. So if we take a look at the platform level, it already looks different, because yeah, reusability is great, so it would be very likely that whatever reverse proxy I use here, I will use here as well, because why should I have two different products? Yeah? And then we have some awesome working patch management in the company, so this absolutely enables that all of these software applications are always on the same patch level, which actually means that when you have a security leak here, you can be pretty sure it's here as well. Yeah? So, and now let's take a look at the application level that looks like this. Yeah? Okay. And this is why I say taking security in the beginning is really important, because more or less here is you more or less directly exposed your ERP system to the internet. Yeah? And I think these kind of pictures should be shown more often, maybe also to the management. Maybe they would understand what I'm saying. Technical, yeah, security bugs are software bugs like all other bugs. That's what I just said. Yeah. More or less, they begin and end with software developers. So the software developers are the guys who more or less make the bugs, not by force, but just by accident. And who can fix them? Yeah, also software developers. But this is actually where it comes to the point. Software developers are very expensive, yeah, and that's the main argumentation that I was facing when trying to get this SDLC running, is that this will increase the effort of the software developers, which means they need to spend more time, which means they are more expensive, all this kind of stuff. So I see a lot of people in the audience nodding, which I think they also had this experience. Yeah, but we can take a look at that finding software bugs is even more expensive. Yeah, the interesting thing is companies are saying, yeah, we need to do more test-driven development. Yeah, because when we have all the bugs in a later stage, that's 50 to 90 times as expensive. Yeah, so more or less the same applies for the security bugs. As the security bugs, they are the same kind of bugs. If I'm finding a security bug later, it's also 50 to 90 times as expensive. Yeah, this is the same argumentation. So when the company says, yeah, I want to have testing, and I want to have early testing to make sure that we get as much of the bugs as possible in an early stage. More or less the same applies also for security-related bugs. Yeah? And maybe a hidden fact that more or less finding software bugs is expensive, yeah? But if others find your bugs, it's even more expensive. Yeah? So, yeah. Yeah, the why on an organizational level is that kind of there is really missing awareness, yeah? On all levels. I'm not saying this is all the management faults. I talk to a lot of software developers who say, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, they also kind of sometimes have this mindset that security is part of a firewall. Yeah, and then the next point is that security is like quality, kind of a non-functional requirement. So it's really hard to grasp it, to measure it. Yeah, and yeah, this is something. And what we figured out is an SDL process is very specific, yeah, in terms of the processes, in terms of the guidelines, in terms of the responsibilities. There's a general high-level idea of what should be included in that kind of life cycle, but it's very specific to a particular company. Yeah, same like all other processes. There is a general idea of how PMI, project management process works, but more or less all of the companies have kind of an adaptation to that for their purposes. And that brings me to one of my first conclusion. More or less, the SDL needs to fit into the company. Yeah, it's hard to change the company to fit to the SDLC, yeah? So I would go the other way around and try to make somehow the SDL fit into the company, yeah? That's the easier approach. So some on the timeline, yeah? So we first started with this, we had a stride security analysis together with Enno and his team in 2011, where more or less the SDL popped out as a good measurement on additionally to whatever we already had in place to maybe think about this. We presented that idea internally, and that was kind of beginning of 2012, which actually means, yeah, it's a good idea, but kind of budget planning for 2012 is already done, so let's talk about it 2013. So more or less then we used 2012 and 2013 for, yeah, kind of scoping and budget and some detailed planning. For the scoping, as we are such a huge company, more or less we directly said, okay, let's start small, and then we said, okay, let's just get this started into our web business domain, yeah, as the first part, and see how it evolves, yeah. We got started in 2014 with a runtime of 4 years, and the phase 1 is what we finished due to financial reasons. I have to say, we more or less, I would not say we got cut of our budget in 2015, but let's say the budget we had for 2015 was shifted to 2016. Yeah, I think I'm not blaming my company, because it's pretty obvious that security is, besides company like ER&W, security is nothing we earn money with. Yeah, so there are companies that make money with security, but the usual companies, for them security is just a vehicle, and it's also kind of the task of the board to decide, okay, where do we spend our money, and it's I think that this is something they have to decide. There's a lot of things that require money, the usual business, R&D, this kind of stuff, and so, yeah. And it was no cut, it was just shifted, and now I really see it also as an advantage. Back then I thought, okay, that's sad, that we more or less need to stop 9 months in this thing, but it was actually good, and I will tell you later why I now think that way. So more or less we finished the phase 1 in beginning of 2015, I think March something, and we just started the phase 2, yeah, and I will tell you later what is content of these 2 phases. Yeah. One important thing that I noticed is that implementing a secure development lifecycle in a company is not about the tools, the guidelines, and whatever. Yeah, it's a change process. So more or less, it's similar to you're reorganizing your organization, having new departments, moving people around. So because you want to change the way the people work, the way the people work together, work with whatever. And that's why change management is really the key. So there are a lot of good tools existing, how to do change management, how to get the people on board of this. Yeah, there is also this nice curve, how people embrace to change. They get informed, then they go down. Oh, this is all bad. We do not want to do this. And this is really interesting, because having this curve in mind, it's also quite understandable why developers, when you go to them and say, yeah, hey, we have great secure development guidelines, you need to use them in future, why some of them first say, no, I've done it so great the past years, so why do you tell me what to do? Okay, yeah, so change management is really important. Tooling and guidelines are still important, because more or less all of the developers are full of work, yeah. And the neutral reaction also is, okay, new process, more work, less efficient, yeah? And that's why really automation is here the answer. So more or less, you need to automate wherever it is possible, yeah? And I will give some insight in what actually our ideas are, because more or less the whole automation aspect is what we now want to do in the phase 2, yeah? And I think this is another big statement I want to say. The more the SDL is a burden to the developer, the more likely it will fail. And the more it supports, the greater it is a success. Yeah? And that sounds like a no-brainer, but I'm still saying it here because it's really true. yeah, how did we do? We thought big and started small. We said, okay, we do not try to involve all the departments. Actually, in such a big company, it's impossible to involve all the departments. Yeah? So we were taking a look into our small area of influence, more or less, what we could influence, and said, okay, what are the important stakeholders in our area, and try to involve these important departments. And that's why I say here stakeholder management is also pretty important. And then try to do everything at once. Also don't try to do everything at once, yeah? And because if you try to do everything at once, it will be too expensive, you're not gonna succeed, yeah? And at the end I said, okay, even if we only have a small SDL or a limited SDL, which maybe does not do everything that big companies like Microsoft do, it's still better than nothing. Then another thing is, look what's already existing. In big companies, there is, yeah, a lot of things are already existing. Processes are existing, guidelines are existing. Maybe other people are already thought about things like this. So making an as-is investigation firsthand to see, okay, what do I already have in my company on intellectual property is really worth, yeah, and saves you effort for redoing this stuff. And then the third point is really important. Don't force anyone to use it. Instead, involve them. Forcing other departments can be quite, yeah, hard, yeah. I will go into detail later on this. And that's why we said, okay, what we do for us, for our department. There I had the buy-in and said, okay, yeah, you can decide it and you do it. But we said we do it with the scope of always sharing everything. So although we had only the aim for doing it for our own department, we were making everything public for the whole Bosch company. And it was really amazing. The word spread really quickly. Hey, these guys, they have really good guidelines. Yeah, instead of doing our own stuff, let's just use this. Or then we got feedback, yeah, oh, we found your guidelines, they're really great. Can we contribute to them? Can we work together? And that's really awesome, because that's actually what we want to achieve. And this is actually the sentence here, that more or less a lot of people who can value this, they're really happy if they do not want to, because they do not want to spend the time doing it themselves. And then you don't need to force. You just have a good product and everybody uses it. Yeah. And yeah, use as much as established from processes and organization-wise. That will actually make the transition to the SDL more smooth. To give you one example is, inside Bosch, we have a product development process, which is pretty defined with, you have a design phase, implementation phase, productive preparation, and so on. So it's kind of following that PMI process. And we thought, okay, instead of coming up with something new, let's try to kind of link ourselves and the questions we actually want to ask and the things we want to emphasize into this process. And that's why I say it's easier to have 10 new questions to an existing list than coming up with another list, yeah? Because the people already know this list, they know they have to do it when they do kind of project. And then when there are new additional questions, this is happening now and then. Yeah, now when the safe harbor was more or less, yeah, when we got rid of that, a question was added: do you intend to store user data overseas or whatever? So these kind of stuff is also added to that list. Yeah. Provide an incentive to others to use the guidelines and the processes. As I mentioned, a lot of people, management, also technicians and so on, they do not really think that deep of security and what can happen like more or less we do. Yeah? And that's why you have to more or less get them on a different point. And that can be either speed, yeah, that you kind of have a fast lane approval process, that you say, okay, if you're following our architecture guidelines, if you're following our rules, we can speed up the approval of kind of firewall openings or whatever is required, or by money. Yeah. So this is something you can do. And I'm really happy that we were able to work together with internal IT security department at Bosch, which is more or less responsible for the corporate security. They liked this approach, and we had a really good collaboration. We still have this. And this is what I want to say here: search for partners inside your company by kind of building up a close collaboration with these central departments. You increase the value and you increase the visibility of your work. Yeah?
Question: how did you manage to reduce the project cost? How did you make that visible to the developers?
By example. Yeah, so the point is this is I will come later on how we measured this. Yeah, may I save that question for the end, because there we'll really see what KPIs we had and what was really visible to the management afterwards, because they asked this question as well. Okay, so what was a focus of us when we provided coding guidelines? More or less we focused a lot on whatever we do, it must be usable, it must be a help for whoever uses it. And for example, with the coding guidelines, when I saw coding guidelines from other departments, and this is really I'm really taking this, I copied this one-to-one. They wrote, your code has to prevent XSS attacks, yeah? That's a guideline, yeah? Great, yeah? But it's not really useful. More or less, it's completely useless, because there are those kind of developers who know what that means and who know what to do, but these kind of developers doesn't need the guidelines, yeah? And there are the other kind of developers who don't know what it means, and for those kind of developers, this is really useless, yeah? And that's why I said, okay, we need to have for everything kind of a code example. So if a developer knows what he does and he's kind of, then he can use it. But if somebody doesn't have any clue what to do, then there is kind of a code example on how to do input validation and these kind of things to prevent this kind of stuff. Yeah, and then another thing that I heard is all these guidelines are already existing in the internet. Might be true, yeah. A lot of things are already existing, the OWASP project and so on. There are a lot of good stuff existing. More or less all the big companies have kind of guidelines. Microsoft provides a lot of good secure development guidelines for their technology stack and so on. But the point is that in these big companies, you always have a mixture of internal guidelines and external guidelines. And for internal developers and also for externals, it's quite hard to figure out, okay, what is really mandatory to use and what is the company expecting to use. So that's why I say, okay, I don't say you need to reinvent the wheel, but take the time to collect what is really mandatory and what is really important for your company and bring it together, yeah, in one central place, yeah. That's helping the developers, because then you can say, hey, go there you see what guidelines are actually mandatory for the development, and when you're linking on a Microsoft guideline, that's fine, but then he has the certainty that this is what he actually needs to use. So this was the very beginning, how we got started. We said, okay, if we have this process, this is the process I meant in the beginning. We have kind of a standard process for developing products. I think that's nothing rocket science, it's pretty normal. And then we figured around, okay, what kind of toolings in terms of security do we have around this process, yeah? And then we split this up into what we are doing and what the central security department is doing. What I highlighted here as the green area is what we took care of. Yeah, so what was our share? Oh, that's not really true. This one is this. I'm telling bullshit. What we as a group did. So to start it that way, that stuff was already existing. So security concept was existing. Security check policies was existing, and this other no. Okay, forget what I just said. I mixed it up. So some of this stuff was already existing, other stuff is to come, you will see at the end, yeah? But this was more or less the overall map that we wanted to achieve, and the green ones is what we did in phase number 1. So now it's right, yes. So what we did is, we did technical controls and blueprints, incorporation and coding guidelines, and implementation policies, how to do it. The central security department, they took care of kind of a website risk classification, so really thinking about, okay, how do I classify what application has a higher risk? They were doing a threat catalog and a rapid risk checklist to kind of, if I'm not knowing what my application risk is, I can take this risk checklist, and then there are general business questions like, do you have external customers? Yes. Do you need to connect to kind of a backend system? Yes or no? So the really high-level questions, but they support actually also the customer to get a high-level overview on what risk class his application will end up. Then we built up a website security compliance check, which is a regular check that is, depending on the risk class, running every 3 to 12 months. And is kind of a black box high-level penetration test from the outside, really checking whether an application that has been developed once is still secure, because not everything that has been developed today is still secure in 1 year. Because this is really important, because a lot of web applications existing are marketing applications somehow being developed for whatever a certain case, and they're fire and forget. You do a campaign, you build a marketing page, you publish it to the internet, and then you forget to get it removed at the end, and then it's there, and more or less the hacker doesn't care where he gets in. Yeah. Penetration tests, we came up with some guidelines on when to do them and how to do them, and so on and so forth. So the green ones is step number 1, and I will come later to what we now do in step number 2. So what we said, our share from our department was, together we did this rough process. We also wanted to limit the usage of frameworks. We want to have binding coding guidelines and for these common languages and frameworks. And we provide a review process also for mobile apps. And this was actually done in 2014, 2015, so that's why I can comment on. Yeah. For this phase that just started is we want to kind of search and establish a static source code analysis, which we want to implement into our continuous integration environment. So automatically when a developer is writing some code, checking it in, it's built, the source code is checked, and so on. Because currently we have guidelines, we give the guidelines to our own developers, to external developers, but it's kind of very hard to check it. We are making some manual reviews not on the 100%, but taking probes in the code and really checking whether the developers are sticking to the guidelines, and we want to replace this by an automated process. The next thing we want to do is we want to review and update the guidelines. So for example, what Matthias Luft stated before, we want to add these big data security guidelines for this job to our list of guidelines. We have new technologies coming up like Node.js, a lot of cloud topics. There is new stuff going on, and we want to add this to our set of guidelines. And then what we want to do is we want to create training materials and kind of come up with a sustainable training concept also to train these guidelines to our colleagues, because we have a high growth, lots of people are joining, and that's why it's important to also have an idea on how to train them. Also internationally, yeah. And this is what we just started, and this is scheduled for this and next year. And maybe, yeah, we'll see, I get a chance with Anu, maybe I can talk to you guys in 2018 again to give you a result on how it turned out at the end, yeah, and what we achieved. So what do we have right now? We have that SDL process is present. We are really using it. We were able to enhance the existing development process with the necessary questions. And inside our department, I know from some other department who already adapted to it, they're really using it. They're taking these guidelines and yeah, as I mentioned, we do not need to force them. They just use them because they have a benefit of it. Yeah, and we have an app review process established. That means we just collected, you know, when you want to publish an app to the Android marketplace or to the Apple marketplace, you need to register as a company and then you get kind of a key where you can, yeah, how to sign these apps, yeah. Yeah, we just grab the keys, yeah. They're now in our department and everybody who wants to publish an app for Bosch, yeah, needs to get the app reviewed by us, yeah. No choice, yeah. Sometimes you have to force people, yeah. But it works, yeah. So we have a hand on this, yeah. And what I think it's really great, and that's why I said I'm not really sad about that we were not able to continue directly in 2015 is more or less 2015, that during that 9 months that we kind of had to stop due to the budget shift to this year, what we achieved till then, all the guidelines, they got spread into the company, yeah? And now as we got started, we got a lot of contribution from other departments who said, hey, we saw your guidelines and we know what you want to do. You want to check out this static source code analyze tool. We have some requirements there as well. Let's work together. And this is really awesome. This is actually what I imagined in the beginning of this project, yeah? Yeah, and then we have what I mentioned before. We have this regular check. This is also running. Maybe quick, what we did in the guidelines is we put the guidelines into kind of a matrix view. I tried to put it into the slides, but it's too big to fit here to be visible. The idea is that we split up the guidelines in topics like security, like general clean coding guidelines and so on, and this is what we have on the y-axis, and on the x-axis we have the technology like Java, like .NET, like PHP, like whatever. And this is all in one matrix as a starting screen in our wiki. So if a developer comes there and he says, okay, I'm searching for security guidelines for this technology, then he can go to the matrix and click on the link. And also what we added in the columns is the people which are responsible. So if he has a contribution and he says, okay, I have found something which I think is worth talking about, then he directly knows, okay, who is responsible for these kind of guidelines and has a contact person. And this is really working very good, yeah. And what we did is we have a kind of a release management process. So we are collecting these changes because these guidelines, they're not fixed, and it would be bad if they would be fixed. They're evolving as the world is evolving. But what we have is we have a release management process. So although we have it in a wiki, what we do now and then is we release a copy from the wiki into a PDF, which has then a revision. This is important because what we now do is, especially when we are working with external companies, is we add these guidelines as part of the contract when we give a contract to an external company. Then we say, okay, these are the guidelines. They are mandatory for you. Yeah, we provide them when we ask them to do some kind of development. And this gives us the possibility later on when they deliver the code and they did not stick to our guidelines to enforce that they actually change their code. Yeah, and this is also really a benefit which also improves kind of when working with external companies. Yeah. Is there somebody in the room who does all the development themselves? Okay, so I think everybody also works with external companies and face that issue, that quality.
Very quick comment from my side as far as integration into the contracts. The benefit is not only that they get stuff fixed, which they would do maybe without that contract appendix, but they do it on their own cost.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it would be like, oh, please,
yes.
Yeah, sure, we can do that. This is an additional effort of X, Y.
Yes.
Once it's in the contract, it's, hey, this is the stuff you're bound to.
Yes.
The guaranteed property of like what we deliver.
Yep.
fix it on your own cost. That's the main aspect of it.
Yeah, thanks, Enno, for this. I implicitly mean that we do not want to pay for them to do it in that, and that's why it's on both sides fair, because they get the guidelines in the beginning. So if they think it's additional effort for them, they have the chance to quote on this. Yeah, and it's also fair when comparing different external suppliers, because there are some external suppliers who have a good quality, and most of the times their offer is a little bit higher because they know making good code and not just making working code is a difference. Yeah. But this is something which is hard to compare to each other. And by these kind of guidelines, we can enforce the same quality, and that also makes the offers more comparable. Yeah, what we also want to do is IT PEP. This is the IT is for IT, and PEP is Product Excellence Process. This is the name, the internal name of this product development process that has some quality gates, and we added security-related questions to this process. So more or less, we were not coming up with a completely new process. We said, okay, there is already something existing. Let's try to hook into this process. Yeah? And now the security is really checked in the quality gates, and the question is asked, did somebody from the security department or did the project security officer approve whatever you do? And then they have to say, yes or no. And that's happening in a very early stage. So if really high security things are popping up, this is popping up in the design phase and not when you want to go live. And the security department doesn't approve your direct connection to the SAP system. Yeah. So the future, we want to enhance it with some tools, with a static code analysis. We want to update and roll out new architecture blueprints, and we want to establish automated KPIs to measure the result of the SDL, because currently we did that manually. I will come to that later, and on what we really achieved with this process. Yeah, but we want to automate this. As soon as we have the tools in place, we can automate this. So this is what we have right now, and this is what we want to do in the second phase. We said, okay, we want to build these awareness and trainings, the static code analysis, and make an update here and there. Okay, the lessons we learned. What worked in our company? Awareness, awareness, and awareness. So this is really important. Awareness on all levels, and collaboration with other departments worked really good. Figure out which departments are important and also interested. Focus on the basic things, this 80-20 principle, yeah, really important. And reuse what is existing for your purpose. What didn't work, try to do everything at once or force other departments by governance. I will go a little bit in detail on these topics, as I think this is maybe the main output of this talk. Awareness on all levels is required, yeah, and this is really interesting. Most of the people, they know that security is important, but they do not have this mindset of security is shared responsibility in their mind, so they don't know that they're actually part of that, both of the problem and the solution. Yeah. So, and especially in big companies where there is a process for everything, it's easy to hide behind processes or behind, yeah, this is not my responsibility, this is some other's responsibility. Yeah. Especially when you have a big IT department like Bosch. The internal IT has 3,500 people and makes a yearly revenue of something like €1 billion. Yeah, so this is the current numbers. There we have an own database department, own network department with lots of people. So this is where it gets complex, because security is shared and needs to go cross topics. Yeah. Yes, here. Especially the fact that security is important on all levels. Yeah, it's most of the times the new information. Yeah, collaboration, really important. In big companies, there is always more than one department working on something. Although one department might claim to be responsible for or has the governance. What the reality is different. Yeah? Point is, although we claim we do all the web business, when we did a scan in the internet, we figured out that only 15% of whatever is labeled with Bosch in the internet is actually coming from our department. So the other 85%, magic. So this is normal. I think in all the other big companies, at least what I talk to, they face kind of similar things. Yeah? But try to find the important ones for the project. Yeah? The companies that have, or the departments that have the governance and the governance is accepted, you can have the governance by, there is no other choice. Like now we have the governance for this mobile stuff. We have the keys, nobody else can publish. So the other departments, they can like it or not, but it's actually our responsibility now. Yeah. Or actually departments that are experts in the particular area, and for that what they do are accepted by other departments. Yeah? And working with those departments will increase the visibility and trust in the activity and the results. And I think this is really important. Yeah? Yeah, focus on some basic things. Yeah? A full-blown SDL is something that needs to grow in a company. And that's why I really like this picture here. If you get this project started, yeah, don't try to implement the process. Try to plant the seed and water it, yeah, so it starts growing, yeah, and that's what I see currently. When I get the perception that other departments are seeing what we did, yeah, although I know it's still a long way to go, I get the perception they know what we did, they see the value, and they want to contribute, and this is how things get started. So I think we successfully planted this seed, yeah, and that's why you need to answer the following questions. What's easy and fast to establish? And where does my company or my stakeholders have a desire? What do they need? Because if you're planting these kind of seed, yeah, they will also try to contribute to have it grow. Yeah. Reuse of existing process infrastructure for your purpose. If there is something in your company already, like a development process or whatever, try to extend it. It's easier than to come up with something new. And the departments maintaining these kind of processes, because there is also maybe somebody who's responsible for the process, they're always happy to get contribution. Yeah? So we never encountered that somebody said, oh no, we do not want you to have any ideas. Yeah? Yeah, try to do everything at once. This is something that didn't work. Yeah, I think that's the best way to fail. Yeah, it's simply too expensive and too complicated. Yeah, and you need to involve too many people, and that's why I repeat here: plant the seed, not build the tree. Yeah, Big Bang approach doesn't really work. Yeah, force other departments by governance. Can be a problem. First problem, get the governance. In some cases it works, in some cases it doesn't. Yeah? If you don't have it, don't try to force someone. Yeah? If you don't have it, don't use it. Yeah? So what we say is we are more or less here again providing an incentive. Although we have the governance for these mobile apps, for example, we provide an incentive because we say, hey, come on, you give your mobile application to us, we make the check, we make the upload for you, we update it, we make sure it is up to date. So this is more or less an incentive. So the departments we are working together with do not really have the feeling as they're forced to work with us. Most of them are really happy because a user department who wants to develop kind of whatever app, yeah, they do not do it themselves. They have kind of an agency helping them, and they most of the times do not even know how to upload it to the Apple Store or whatever. So they're more or less happy if they get somebody to support them. And for us, it's a chance to make a review. So it's a win-win situation. And this is really important, that this convinced by quality and argumentation, that's what I just said. Because if you go to somebody, whoever, yeah, doesn't matter if he's a developer or a manager or whatever, and you tell him that more or less he did something wrong in his job, yeah, what is actually happening when you go there and tell him, hey, I have new guidelines for you, you don't need to stick to them, yeah, how would you feel? Yeah, think of yourself if somebody's coming and telling you, yeah, you have to stick to this new stuff, more or less talking through flowers that he screwed the last years. Yeah, and that's exactly the reason why it doesn't work. Yeah. Okay, summary. I think SDL is critical and important for each company, even it starts small. Someone has to start. So even in big companies, it's don't wait for someone to get this started. If you think it's important, try to start it yourself, because otherwise nothing will change. Yeah, don't wait for the others. Go ahead and plant the seed. Now to the ending, measurable results. What we really could measure after this more or less short time being. So we had to say we had this running beginning of 2015. I now for this talk took the first results with some projects end of last year. Yeah, and this were really measurable results. The better code quality measurement by code reviews. This is perception, as we have not the tools in place, but I asked around in my department all the other architects who were doing these code reviews, and they said that the code really improved compared to before we had these binding guidelines. Yeah? Less findings in penetration tests, decrease of 30%. This is measurable. I just took some pen test results from end of last year compared with some pen test results from 2012, 2013, yeah, and just counted, yeah, and took the average. And this is why I ended up with something like 30% less findings. What was also pretty impressive is that especially the critical and high findings, they have decreased by nearly 100%, yeah. So this is really great. Yeah, faster approval of architecture and projects. This is more or less measurement by feeling. Yeah, so yeah, this is hard to get a number here, but I know in the past it took us something like 1 to 2 months to get this approved. Yeah, and now it's way quicker as we have an aligned way of how to do this. This is not only our success. This is also a success of the Central Security Department, which is actually responsible for these kind of approvals. They have improved their processes as well. But overall, I think we speeded up a lot here. And I think the last point is really important. We built up a very good network of all the people involved in kind of security inside Bosch. Inside the central IT department and outside the central IT department. And we actually work there together. And we have one voice to the customer, so we also decided, okay, who's kind of responsible for what area, who's shaping what area, and the customer gets the perception that the things fit together, because when I go there and tell something and somebody else goes there and tells something, it ends up with the same result, and that's actually good. Yeah. And also this network enables us to now take the challenges of the new upcoming things like Internet of Things and all these kind of things. Okay, that's it from my side. Hopefully this gave you a good introduction. You're more than welcome to ask questions.
Thank you very much, Anna. I think it becomes clear why this type of talks is so important, as real people can share real experience. Any questions? If there are none...
my email is in the talk, the slides will be published, and whenever you have something, then just write me an email.
Yeah, and he will be around for the rest of the conference. Oh, there is one question. I'll pick that one.
Yeah.
To find a risk level application. You also implement in Bosch something like information classification, which is
yes. So what we already had inside Bosch was a risk classification based on data, like what's the or independent of security, like what availability are we expecting, what's the criticality, what's the integrity, these kind of, we call that risk classes, that was already existing. But what was more or less the idea behind this risk classification is to take these kind of data, which is more or less defined by the user department, because the user department is the owner of the data. So the user department has to decide, okay, what happens if this data gets stolen? What's the potential impact to Bosch? Yeah, or what happens if this data is compromised, yeah, or faked, whatever. So this is the user department has to decide, and that's what they can, yeah. And what we came up with, or more or less the colleagues from the security department, is kind of with a matrix on how to map these numbers into a security classification to really say, okay, we kind of compile these different numbers and end up with one single number, or we called it A, B, C, D, and so with a four different types to really say, okay, this is the risk classification of the application. Yeah. So
there was some base already.
Yes, there was something already existing. Yeah. This was already existing. Yeah.
Thanks again, Arne.